Hi everyone, this is Anne from Lolly and Grace, and welcome to this tutorial for the famous French knot, or it could be, depending on how you feel about it, the infamous French knot. Why infamous? Because many people, while many people love them, like I do, I love them, many people find them difficult and fiddly. So here's what I'm going to do in this tutorial. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through just the basics of how to create a French knot. And then stick around because then I'm going to take you through some of the reasons that your French knots might be failing. Here is the very basic how to make a French knot. You're going to come up. I have a knot in the end of my thread. And now you are going to hold on to this thread. I'm right-handed, so I hold on to it with my left hand. Then you will wrap the needle with the thread a different number of times, depending on how small or large you want your knot to be. You put your needle down back into the fabric, and you pull the needle through. That is the most basic explanation, but there is a little bit more to it than that. So let me take that a little bit slower and talk to you about the things you want to make sure you are doing. So first thing, when you are wrapping the thread around the needle, I wrap away from myself. Some people wrap towards themselves. That doesn't really matter. It's going to come out the same either way. I would maybe say just be consistent, but find which way is comfortable for you. When you are wrapping, here is where the first issue arises that I think trips up many people, and that is tension. If you are struggling to get your needle through the fabric, your tension is probably too tight. So when I'm wrapping this, I am not choking up on this needle so tight that it is just gripping that needle. I'm making sure that it is against the needle, but not too tight. I'm also making sure that it's not too loose. If it's too loose, you're going to struggle to control this. So you just want a nice tension where it's up against the needle, but you could still slide the thread up and down the needle. So here is the next place where you might get tripped up on a French knot, and that is where to put the needle back in. When I say you put the needle back into the fabric, you do not put it right exactly where your thread came up. You want to put it just like one little thread distance away. If you put it right back into the place where your needle came up, when you pull it through, you are most likely going to pull the whole knot all the way through the fabric. Many people say, I pulled on it and it just disappeared, it went to the back. That's what has happened to you. You've put the needle back right down into the exact same spot. So now I'm going to wrap my needle. I'm going to go 2 times. I'm going to put that needle down right next to where I came up. Let me do that again. All right, so here's the next place that you might be encountering a problem. When I make my knots, I have, let's see if I can get that to show you. Okay, I've wrapped my needle and I put it in, and what I do next is I slide those wraps down towards the end. I'm holding the tip of the needle is in the fabric, so it's kind of anchored there. And I very gently slide those wraps down towards, so they're flat against the fabric. I'm going to turn my needle up so it's more perpendicular to the fabric. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my finger right here. I'm not pressing down really, really hard on the fabric, but I'm just keeping that thread kind of making it behave right there. So now when I push that needle down into the fabric, I'm going to hold this finger here. I'm going to pull through. I didn't struggle to pull the needle because I didn't make my wraps too tight. And right up until the end, see how that thread kind of wants to twist on me? But keeping my finger there, I'm going to hold it right until the end. Now, perfect little French knot there. I'll do that again for you. This time I'm going to wrap 3 times. You can change the size of your knot by the number of strands that you use and how many times you wrap it. You can, you could do a 1 strand, well, I've never really tried a 1 strand, 1 wrap French knot. That might be just completely, it'll be too small. But 2 strands, 3 strands, the more strands you get, it gets a little more unwieldy, so keep that in mind. And the more wraps you give it, it will become a little more unwieldy. So if you did a 4 strand and you wrapped it 5 times, that's going to be a pretty intense knot right there. So I'm working with 3 here. I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 times this time. Put that needle down right by where the thread came up. Gently slide while I'm pulling and sliding. I'm going to pull. Oh, okay. See what happened right there? Can you see how those strands got out of alignment? They're kind of loose. I don't want to continue with this knot like this because that's just the wraps didn't stay together. So I'm going to start over. 1, 2, 3. Put the needle down, slide the wraps to the fabric. They got a little bit out of place, but they kind of behaved again. Turn that needle more perpendicular, put my finger here, pull it through. If you are struggling, as I said, when it comes time to pull that needle back down through the fabric, if you're really, really struggling to get it through the fabric, the first issue is, like I said, is that you've just wrapped it too tightly. It's just, you're choking up too much on that needle. But another way that you can help that is to use what's called a milliner's needle. And this is a milliner's needle is a needle that it does not have a bulge where the eye is. So in other words, the shaft is the same width starting all the way here, all the way down until you get to the point. So the fact that it does not have a big bulge right here where the eye is means that when it's time to pull it through all of those wraps, it's going to glide through much more easily. So a milliner's needle, if you're constantly struggling, is a good idea to use for your French knots. I am going to quickly show you the difference between the size that you can get of a knot depending on the number of wraps. So I'm using 3 strands. For this one, I'm going to wrap it once. So there's a tiny little knot. This one, I'm going to wrap it twice. This one, I will wrap it 3 times. Now I'm going to wrap it 4 times. And I think 2, 3, count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Past about 4 wraps, I would probably move up. I would increase the number of strands before I would add more wraps past 4 because it gets a little, top heavy, a little wobbly. But once you pull it, tight against the back of the fabric and knot that thread, it should hold in place. But I wouldn't do more than 4 wraps, I don't think. Now, there's one other issue that can occur if, say, you're doing many French knots like all in a row or all over your pattern, and you're doing a French knot after French knot. Another thing that can happen is that your thread can, as you're pulling it through and wrapping it and going back down and pulling it back up and wrapping it, it can start to get twisted. And let me see if I can convey to you what happens when that. You can tell because your thread wants to, let me back out a little bit, zoom out. Your thread, see how when I let go of this thread, how it, see how it twists up on itself like that? If that is happening, if you've done a lot of French knots in a row, I know that's hard to see. If you've done a lot of French knots in a row and your thread is really twisting, that's going to make your knots, your French knots, this sounds counterintuitive, but the thread's going to knot up. It's going to catch, and as you're pulling it through, it's not going to pull through smoothly. It's going to knot, and it's not going to finish the knot correctly. So if that is happening, just let your thread hang, hang it over. Just take your hoop and just let the thread hang so that that thread unwinds until it's smooth again, and then you can keep going. So I'm going to do one more knot before we end this tutorial. That thread's still a little bit twisted. Hopefully this one will not fail on me as I leave you. So there's your French knot. I hope you found this helpful and that from here on out, all of your French knots pull through smoothly and never knot up and always work perfectly. Thanks for joining me. Bye.